All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is George Fowler, and I lead the planning practice at Spinnaker SCA. And today we're going to talk about a journey that we've taken with ASC. Lisa, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So, like George said, I am the VP of Supply Chain for ASC. And what does that mean? So what is ASC? Let's just give you a little bit of a background so that you can understand how important the planning really is for our business. I've been with ASC for 11 years, and we weren't always ASC. I started with a company called Smith Cooper. Smith Cooper was 1/10 the size of what ASC is now. And over the last 11 years, we have grown through continuous acquisition, mergers with competitors. And so the supply chain that I lead has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex over time. That to me is really exciting to see a company grow that much and change that much. What that means though is that the supply chain has to change and the systems that run that supply chain have to change. And so what Blue Yonder is the fourth planning system that I have put in place. And we are actually in the process right now of going through an upgrade in that. And so I've learned a lot over that time about how to implement a system, what it takes, what to do, what not to do. And I've done and not done all the things that you should and shouldn't do. And so when George asked me to speak about this, I thought, yeah, this would be an interesting opportunity because as I thought about it, I thought I actually have had some experience here. And hopefully somebody can learn from that experience.
So Lisa, this wasn't just a version upgrade for you. This was a pretty significant change in the business. Can you tell us a little bit about, what you were looking to do as part of the scope of the project?
Sure. When we implemented, so we went live with Blue Yonder version 2019 in 2022. It's a lot of 20s. At that time, our business looked very different. So again, I've been here 11 years. That was halfway through the cycle of going from 1x to 10x, right? And so the business looked different from a couple of different perspectives. One, it was smaller. Two, the nature of our demand was more, I would say, an MRO. Let me actually take a pause here and tell you what ASC does and makes. ASC manufactures either in our own facilities or in a contract manufactured facility anywhere around the world. Industrial product that if you were to open up the walls, you would see what we do. Wherever you have any kind of medium, a liquid, a gas that needs to flow through a pipe and be controlled, that's what we make. So the connections that hook those pipes together, the hangers that hold them to the ceiling, valves that control the flow, even sprinkler heads. I don't necessarily see anything.
There are a few out here.
But I can see some of the, maybe not our product, but product that we make up here in the ceiling. And so this product is in commercial facilities, restaurants. Yeah, it's in any kind of office building, stadiums, hotels. And now what we're seeing, which is part of what's driving our demand change, is what we call mega projects. All the data centers that are going up. So the NVIDIA folks are interested in that, right? All the chip manufacturers, the battery production plants, large scale medical facilities. These campuses are huge and they drive demand in a pattern that looks so different than it had in the past. And that was a driver for how we would run this upgrade. This upgrade wasn't just we have to get from 2019 to 2025 because we have to. It's we have to do it, but when we do it, we have to make this system function for the business that we are today. And that's the main. That's really the meat of this upgrade. We have where we sit in the market with our customers. If you envision an hourglass, you have a broad top, you have a narrow center, and you have a broad bottom. And we sit right in that center, and we serve up that broad top is the portfolio that we offer. It's a very broad-based portfolio, And our customers are also broad-based set of customers, and they need all that product, but they don't have the capability to go get all that product. And we do. So we sit at the center and we hide all that complexity from them. Now, take this hourglass, the top is really tall because we have a really long lead time. The bottom is really short because our customers want the product the next day. And so that's why planning is so important to us. I have to know 6 months ahead of time what inventory I need on the shelf because some customer is going to want it tomorrow. And now what's happening is that the customers don't just want 100 pieces or 1,000 pieces. They want 10,000 pieces of something that they used to want 100 of. It's such a change in demand, and it comes in very large spikes. And so that's the nature of the demand that's changing and what's driving how we need to plan differently and structure the system to handle that.
So, when we started talking about this upgrade, we started looking at it from different perspectives. One, there was the technical perspective, and then 2, there was the underlying business transformation that you were going through. I remember you telling me, you knew something was wrong when you started to kind of unpack what was going on there. Can you dig into that a little bit?
Certainly. When we went live, and I look back on this now, Blue Yonder is a very complex system. There's a lot we did not understand about it because there's so much that it can do. As we started using it, we started to run into situations where we were not as flexible as we needed to be or less efficient than we wanted to be, and we had a hard time making the system flex to what we needed. And I had a sense that there was something underneath, not in Blue Yonder itself, but in some custom code that our initial implementers had put in it. But what I could not do is articulate it. I just knew something wasn't right. And so that's one of the main drivers. So we talked about we have to upgrade, we know that one. 2, we know we have a business change, but 3, I need this system to be as stable and clean as possible so that when I upgrade next time, because there will be a next time, it's a lot easier. We had unexpected downtime, batch. If you don't have Blue Yonder, you don't know what batch is, but overnight processes that didn't run, that would fail. And so I needed to understand why was it not stable and why was it so restrictive when Blue Yonder is one of the most flexible systems there is, right? Yeah. So that was what I thought was happening, but I didn't know how to articulate it.
Gotcha. I think what you're describing is kind of the technical debt, and I think we've all been through it. After having years of companies, different people over different times do enhancements to making the system more robust, adding their own customizations and so on. After a time, you get a pretty big spaghetti web of code that's out there, with different styles and so on. So one of the things that we did together was we brought our tool, Slingshot, to the table. And this is our agentic platform that helps us to not just go out and look at the system, but interrogate all of that code, document that code, and help to rationalize it so that you could go back and add your secret sauce or the changes in your business to be able to interpret that as it went forward. So can you tell me a little bit from your perspective how this helped to accelerate and enable some of the work that you were doing to incorporate?
Yes. So I want to go back to, there is custom code that underlies our system. And there was quite a bit of it that was part of what our initial implementers called their template, which made it faster for them to implement, but made it harder for us to understand exactly what was going on underneath. So when you applied that tool to our system, we found a number that I was astonished. 55,000, is that the right number? 55,000 lines of custom code, not native to Blue Yonder, sitting inside our system. I never asked for 55,000 lines. I know I asked for some customizations. I'm guilty, but not 55,000 lines worth. So that was a shock to me. And then they actually found 11 different bugs in that code.
Yeah.
And so not all of them were even things that we would even understand how to find, but were happening. So that was one that was incredible. It was validating to me to understand that I knew something was amiss, but I couldn't articulate it. And so now suddenly here it is on a platter. Here's what's wrong. And so that's one. And then what that does is it allows me now to have a conversation, not just in IT speak, but what you were able to come back to me and say, well, here's what this means in English. So that in English, I could then solve the problem and figure out, okay, what are we going to do going forward? What has to be fixed? What would have to be fixed in the future? What decisions do I have to make? Then we can actually have a plan to solve the problem. And that was so invaluable to me because one of the things I wanted the most out of this upgrade was a clean, stable system. And that was what was going to allow me to get that.
Gotcha. No, that's a great point. And Clay, we were just talking about the same thing just a minute ago. Being able to take the code that's out there, transform that code into plain English, being able to then match that against your business process and understand what it's actually doing, and then reinterpret that back into the code so that you can upgrade, add more bells and whistles in terms of making it more supportable over time, incorporating changes within the application and then changes within the business is an important part of moving forward. And I think you did highlight the fact that it actually found bugs that you didn't even know were out there, which is like a really important part of that.
Yeah.
So, as we move forward, how do you think it's made the foundation stronger as you move forward with behind the scenes?
One of the biggest changes I've noticed is just how much we understand the system and how to use it and what it's doing. And when we have that, then we can understand how to make it work for us. Yeah. And we've had a lot of really good aha moments in this upgrade because we now understand it better. We understand the system better. We know where our company has gone in terms of the market and the nature of the demand that we need to try to support and what planning needs to do for us. And now I can bring those two things together because I have a much better understanding of the system and its capabilities. I do see the level of engagement in this upgrade versus the initial implementation, because the team understands it better, has been really off the charts. It's really interesting a lot of times. And even so, we went live actually on on the 2025 version over this past weekend, and we had everybody on the team in and testing. When we went live for the initial go live, we had very few people in there wanting to participate over the weekend, and it was Father's Day weekend this past weekend. So the team is really invested in it.
Yeah. So I think one point that you really made here is that AI didn't replace the business judgment and all the things that you wanted to put into the solution and enhance it. It just exposed how the system was working so that you could add that sort of collective knowledge into it.
Yes, and one of the things that we've really switched to with this version is, now that we understand how to get more out of the system, where can we make it do the basic work and then let the team members work by exception? Right. The team was doing all the basic work before, and that was not why you put in the system like Blue Yonder.
I think one of the things that we really focused on as part of this assessment was the complementary side of doing the business evaluation, understanding the target operating model that you were searching for, and then being able to align that to what the system is doing. And I think one of the things that Slingshot helps to do is not just assume that because this is the way you implemented it 5 years ago, but it tells you exactly how the solution is working today. And when you put those two together and evolve to move forward, it actually transforms very quickly. I think one of the other aspects that's really important is the speed at which you can do this. I know you guys have been working on a mechanism to upgrade the internal data within the system and so on. This is a way of doing a complementary effort on all of the batch scripts that exist outside. And as you guys know, who've been in the industry for a while, it's not always the same group that's doing coding. They're not always using the same approaches and so on. So this is a way of expediting that process. In our particular case, with just in the matter of just a few weeks, we were able to interrogate the code, go through a parallel exercise in looking at the business itself, validating that the code was doing what we thought it was, finding those errors, as we said, and then moving forward to designing the new solution that we were going to put in place. So, given that, what's next for ASC? Right?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got behind, sounds like, on the system. It was designed for an old business.
Yep.
And you're a new business.
Yes.
How are you going to change that in the future?
Make sure that we don't fall behind again.
Yeah, because the analogy sometimes people I hear give is it's a car, you buy it, and then you don't maintain the car. Well, then you don't like the car. You're like, the car doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Well, you didn't do anything to the car, you know.
Right.
So I hear these stories quite often, but so how is the process going to change in the future to stay on top?
So I want to go back to one thing I mentioned earlier, which is, do we understand the system? That is really, really important. And what is it designed to do? What should it do? What should it not do? So that we can understand that working from that base. The other important piece is, and I did it as an exercise with one part of my team in this just very recently with the upgrade. I said, imagine what it is you need to do, but pretend Blue Yonder doesn't exist. Because what happens is we tend to get, especially with the system we're using or implementing at a certain time, we get caught up in the terminology and thinking that it's always been there and it's always going to be there. The only way I can think about solving a new problem is in terms of Blue Yonder, or in terms of whatever system that we're talking about. But that limits you from understanding what you really need to accomplish. And so pretend there is no system there. Just what's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And talk about it in terms of the business terms. Because and you always have to keep that before you. That's the objective we have. This happens to be a tool I'm using, but maybe it's not the right one for that, but it's the right one for this, right? For this piece and not that piece. And that's really the change in perspective that, in my mind, would keep us moving forward, and always recognizing, because that's the thing, you don't necessarily recognize that you've fallen behind until you've fallen behind. I'd like to know that I'm about to fall behind. And so if I'm always keeping in mind, I have an objective and it's this business objective, how do I get there? And thinking about, there's an exercise I like to do, which is, okay, pretend you're there in the future. How did you get there? What steps did you have to take? One, and then there's another version, which is, what you failed to get there. What happened? And that can help you. I think that can be one that can really drive this. Well, we hard coded everything, and now we can't do anything else, right? So things like that would really help you in this process.
So within the Spinnaker world, we have this notion of HI plus AI, which is human intelligence plus AI. And that always keeps you looking forward, looking at the new opportunities to build your business, looking at the changes in your target operating model, looking at leading practices across the industry, making sure that you're keeping pace with the others in that industry, carving out your market share, but also making sure that your secret sauce is preserved within the application. By continuing to move forward and driving in much the way that Lisa's done it, I think they've done an exceptional job of identifying where their key opportunities are from a business perspective. Now using AI, you can actually continue to document the system. You can continue to build out your test cases. You can build out and make sure that the system stays aligned with the capabilities that you're putting in from a business process perspective, and are doing so in unison. In the past, and I've been doing this, I started my career with Main Logistics 30 years ago. We've always had this gap between what you thought the system was doing, what you documented the system to do, and what the parameters say it's doing versus what's actually happening. And this is a way of really interrogating the system and keeping that up to date. So tools like Slingshot will always be available to do that other part. And I guess, looking back at my career, like I started off on the technology side, moved more to the business side, but technology guys are really good at coding, but not really good at documenting. And this is a way of keeping those two things intact, because in alignment, because AI is really good at documenting, if nothing else.
That I want to emphasize that if we had had good documentation of how the system was designed and what was really inside of it, we could have identified the issues earlier. And so that's something that's really critical. Again, if we think about when you do implement, choose a partner, you have to ask for that.
Okay. So I guess I have one final question. So if you were giving advice to a supply chain executive that's going through an upgrade, going through a change in their business model and looking to the future, what kind of advice would you give them, given what you've gone through?
Let me maybe incorporate some of the things I've talked about throughout this. The most important thing is to understand what you need like you said, for the future. Where are you going? Where are you today? What do you need today? But where could you be going in the future? And think about it in those terms of not the system you're focusing on, but just what do you need to accomplish? What are the actions you need to take, tasks you have to do? And understand, are your processes today, agnostic of any system, supporting what you need to do? That's because the last thing you want to do is implement and codify and automate bad process. We did that, in fact, in one part of our initial Blue Yonder upgrade, and we undid that. Implementation, and we undid that here. Take the time. You don't think you have the time, but you'll have less time later when you finally realize that you got automated a bad process. So do take the time to think about it up front and make sure that your processes are what you need them to be, and then apply the system on top of it.